You almost never argue. There's no shouting, no scandals, no drama. From the outside, your marriage looks calm and even good. But inside, a strange feeling appears more and more often, as if there's emptiness between you, as if you live side by side but not together. And the scariest part, you can't explain what exactly is wrong, because formally everything is fine. And that's exactly why it becomes even heavier. The absence of arguments is often perceived as a sign of a good marriage. Many people sincerely believe that if there is no shouting, blame, or conflict, then everything is fine. And at the beginning of a relationship, that really can be true. When there is interest, desire, warmth, people try to hear each other, avoid sharp corners, and look for compromises. But over time, silence in a relationship can begin to mean something very different. Not closeness, but caution. Not calm, but distance. At some point, you stop arguing not because everything between you is good, but because you don't want to bring up things that will lead nowhere anyway. You may notice that there are topics inside you that you no longer voice. Not because they disappeared, but because you already know how it will end. Either with a conversation about nothing, or with defensiveness, or with promises that have no consequences. And then you choose silence. Not out of indifference, but out of exhaustion. Gradually, a special kind of silence appears in the relationship. It isn't tense. It's convenient. There are no conflicts in it, but there is no life either. You talk about everyday matters, work, tasks, plans, but more and more rarely do you talk about what you feel, about missing each other, about lacking warmth or closeness, not because it isn't important, but because it feels pointless to talk about it. And at this point, many women begin to feel a strange emptiness. It isn't sharp. It isn't dramatic. It's hard to explain even to yourself. From the outside, everything looks normal. You live together. You are polite to each other. You don't conflict. But inside, there is a feeling that you've somehow stopped being a couple. You've become neighbors, or a household management team. The hardest part of this state is that you can't make a complaint, because no one did anything bad. No one shouted. No one hurt anyone. No one left. And yet, the sense of connection has disappeared. And then an inner conflict arises. You think, maybe I'm just too sensitive? Maybe this is what a mature marriage looks like? Maybe I'm expecting too much? And these questions make you fall even more silent, because you start doubting your right to want more. But the truth is, the absence of arguments is not yet a sign of closeness. An argument is contact. It's a collision of living people. It's an attempt to be seen and heard. An emptiness is the absence of movement, the absence of risk, the absence of a living exchange. When relationships become too even, it often means that both people have learned to go around each other, so as not to touch. And over time, this carefulness turns into distance. You can feel lonely next to a person who is formally close to you. And this loneliness is especially heavy because it has no clear explanation. You don't suffer openly, but you don't truly live either. And if you recognize yourself in this state right now, it's important to hear one thing. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not inventing a problem. You are feeling the absence of connection. And this is a real experience, even if it's hard to put into words. You don't feel sharp pain. You don't suffer every day. You simply live next to a person with whom you feel less and less connection. And that's exactly why this state is so hard to recognize. Because in society it's commonly believed, if there are no conflicts, everything is fine. If people don't argue, they've found balance. But emotional emptiness is not the absence of conflict. It's the absence of involvement. You can talk calmly, discuss plans, solve everyday issues, laugh at the same jokes. But at the same time, you increasingly catch yourself feeling that there is no real contact between you, no conversations after which it feels warmer, no sense that you are truly seen, no desire to share what's happening inside you. And gradually, you begin to make yourself smaller in the relationship. You speak less. You share superficially. You keep complex thoughts to yourself. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're not sure anyone needs to hear it. At this point, a strange feeling of loneliness often appears. You're not exactly alone, but there's no one you can truly be with. And this loneliness is especially heavy because it can't be explained by external reasons. You have a family, you have a home, you have a partner, and yet inside there is emptiness. Sometimes this emptiness shows up in small things. You don't rush home. You stay longer at work. You find things to do just to avoid being alone with this feeling. Not because being with the person is bad, but because nothing happens when you're together. The relationship becomes even predictable, safe. But along with safety, aliveness disappears. You don't take risks. You don't argue. You don't talk about difficult things. And over time, not only conflict disappears, but interest does too. Very often at this point, a woman begins to doubt herself. She asks, maybe something is wrong with me? Maybe I'm just ungrateful? Maybe this is what a normal marriage looks like? These questions make her close off even more. Because if the problem is me, then there's no point in talking about it. But the truth is, emotional emptiness is not a sign of a flawed character, and not a sign of ingratitude. It's a sign that the living exchange between two people has disappeared. When relationships live for a long time without open conversations, without the risk of being inconvenient, without the possibility of being vulnerable, they become functional but empty. And this emptiness can be scarier than arguments, because an argument is a sign that the connection still exists, and emptiness is a sign that the connection has weakened. It's important to understand, this state does not mean the relationship is doomed, but it does mean it cannot continue on autopilot. Because emptiness doesn't disappear on its own. It is either filled with closeness, or over time turns into distance. And the earlier this is recognized, the greater the chance to change something, at least within yourself. Emotional emptiness almost never appears suddenly. It doesn't arise from one event, one phrase, or one crisis. Most often it forms slowly over years, almost imperceptibly. At the beginning of a relationship, people usually try to be closer. They talk more. They share. They discuss not only everyday matters but themselves. But over time, fatigue appears in the relationship. Work, obligations, responsibility, routine. And at some point, conversations begin to simplify. First just a little, then more and more. You stop discussing difficult topics not because they disappeared, but because there's no energy to explain, prove, and wait for a reaction every time. You may remember how you used to share what hurt you, how you talked about your feelings, how you hoped that a conversation would change something. But if those conversations ended with a misunderstanding, defensiveness, a promises without follow-through, the psyche draws a conclusion: it's better not to bring it up. That's how the first distancing appears. Not as a conflict but as energy conservation. You tell yourself, I don't want to complicate things. I don't want to argue. It's not that important. And every time you choose silence instead of contact, another small gap appears between you. Over time, these gaps accumulate. The relationship becomes functional. You solve tasks. You organize life. You do everything right. But gradually, the sense that there is a living space between you disappears. Politeness replaces sincerity. Caution replaces closeness. Predictability replaces interest. And this is a very insidious state, because from the outside everything looks stable. There are no reasons for alarm, no drama, but inside you increasingly feel that you have nowhere to place your feelings. You don't share joy because it seems not to be met. You don't share anxiety because you don't want to be difficult. You don't share doubts because you're not sure it's safe. And gradually you are left alone with yourself, even while being married. It's very important to understand, this doesn't mean someone intentionally pulled away. Most often it happens mutually and unconsciously. One person stops talking because they're tired, the other because they don't feel a response. And step by step the connection weakens. Emptiness in such relationships is not the absence of love. It's the absence of movement. Love may still be there. Habit may still be there. Care may still be there. But without living exchange, relationships begin to resemble a closed room, where the windows haven't been open for a long time. And that's exactly why this state is so hard to recognize, because formally nothing is broken, but internally it has become cramped and empty. If you recognize your marriage in this right now, it's important to hear this. You didn't imagine this emptiness. It didn't arise because you became too sensitive. It arose because the connection gradually thinned, and no one stopped to notice it. Emotional emptiness in a marriage is far more frightening than open conflict. And it's not because arguments are pleasant. It's because arguments are at least some form of contact. When people argue, there is still tension between them, emotions, and attempt to reach each other. A fight is a sign that the connection is still alive, even if it's painful. Emptiness, on the other hand, is silence without movement. In such relationships, no one shouts, no one accuses, no one slams doors, but no one tries to get closer either. You can live side by side for years without experiencing sharp pain, yet constantly feel that something important is missing. And this absence is the hardest thing to acknowledge, because it can't be explained with words like he's bad, or we're always fighting. On the contrary, from the outside, everything looks calm, sometimes even proper. And then a woman begins to doubt herself. She asks herself, why do I feel bad if we don't have problems? Why do I feel lonely next to someone I hardly ever argue with? These questions bring shame, because it seems like there's no reason to complain. And because of that, the emptiness often remains unspoken. It's not brought into conversation. It's not discussed with friends. It's something you try not to notice, but it doesn't go anywhere. Over time, this silence begins to affect everything. The desire to be close, physical intimacy, the sense of us. A feeling appears that you're living parallel lives, each in your own world, each with your own thoughts, worries, and joys. And even if you spend time together, that time doesn't fill you. What's frightening is that emptiness gives no clear signals about what to do. There's no argument you can resolve, no specific problem you can fix. There's only the feeling that life is passing by, and you're in it as if on pause. At this point, many women begin to convince themselves that it's better not to touch what is still holding together, that maybe this is what a mature marriage looks like, that passion and closeness are something temporary. But inside there remains an anxious feeling, that you've somehow given up an important part of yourself. Emptiness is frightening also because it confronts you with a choice no one prepares you for. Either to admit that something between you has disappeared, or to continue living as if it isn't there. And both options are scary. The first because it requires honesty and change. The second because it means slow fading. And if you're in this place right now, it's very important to say this. You don't have to pretend that everything is fine, just because there are no conflicts. The absence of arguments is not a guarantee of closeness. And emptiness is not a whim. It's a signal that the connection has weakened and needs attention, not avoidance. When there are no arguments in a relationship but there is emptiness, a strong urge arises to urgently fix something, to find the right words, to do things the right way, to bring back a sense of closeness at any cost. And it's exactly here that actions are most often taken that seem logical, but in reality deep in the distance. The first thing that almost never works is pretending that everything is fine. A woman convinces herself there is no problem because there are no conflicts, that she's just tired, that it's temporary. But emptiness doesn't disappear when it's ignored. It becomes familiar. And the longer it's ignored, the harder it becomes to touch later. The second is trying to become even more convenient, adjusting more, talking less about yourself, being softer, calmer, more patient. Many women at this point think, if I don't create tension, things between us will feel easier. But the opposite happens. The less you show yourself, the less living contact remains in the relationship. Closeness is not born from convenience. It is born from presence. The third is trying to restore closeness through external actions. Trips together, dates, plans. This can create a short-term sense of connection. But if it's still impossible to talk about what truly matters inside, these attempts quickly turn into formality. You do things together, but you don't become closer. The fourth is looking for the cause only in yourself. A woman begins to analyze. Maybe she's become boring, uninteresting, too demanding. This path is especially destructive because it turns a problem of connection into a problem of self-worth. Emptiness in a relationship is not a personality defect. It's a disruption of contact between two people. The fifth is waiting for your partner to feel it on their own. Many hope that if they say nothing, the other person will notice the changes by themselves. But if the relationship already lives in silence, silence doesn't become a signal. It becomes part of the system. The sixth is having conversations without inner grounding. When you speak not from clarity, but from accumulated pain and resentment. Such conversations often end with defensiveness, devaluation, avoidance of the topic. And after them, the emptiness feels even stronger. The seventh is convincing yourself that everyone lives this way. That closeness is a luxury. That depth is naive. That stability matters more. This is the quietest way to abandon yourself. Not through drama, but through gradual resignation. It's important to understand one key thing. All of these approaches have one thing in common. They do not restore contact. They either mask the emptiness, make it less noticeable, or turn the problem inward. But connection between people does not return. Where it's impossible to be alive, inconvenient, real, and realizing that the familiar ways don't work is not a dead end. It's the point where you can stop doing what hasn't brought results for years. The hardest part of emotional emptiness is the absence of clear steps. When there's a conflict, you can make up. When there's a fight, you can talk it through. When there's a problem, you can look for a solution. But when there's emptiness, it's unclear where to even begin. And here it's important to say the main thing right away. This is not about urgently fixing the relationship, and not about forcing yourself to feel differently. The first thing that truly matters is to stop devaluing what you feel. Emptiness is not a whim, not spoiledness, not expecting too much. It's a signal that the connection has weakened and no longer supports you the way it used to. As long as you convince yourself that everything is fine, you remain alone even while next to a partner. The next important step is to restore honesty, at least within yourself. You don't have to speak right away. You don't have to act right away. But it's important to stop running from the questions. Am I truly well here? Is there a living connection between us? Can I be myself in this relationship? These questions don't require immediate answers, but they bring you back into reality. Very often, women try to resolve emptiness through activity, trying harder, investing more, caring even more on themselves. But emptiness is not filled by effort. It is filled by reciprocity. And if there is no reciprocity, you are not obligated to create it alone. Sometimes the most important shift happens not in external actions, but in an inner permission to stop living on autopilot. Permission to notice. Permission to feel. Permission not to agree to just okay, when inside it's been empty for a long time. This doesn't mean you have to destroy anything, and it doesn't mean you have to leave. It means you have the right not to pretend. From this point, a real conversation can appear. Not a conversation from resentment. Not a conversation from an ultimatum, but a conversation from clarity. I feel that something between us has become empty, and I no longer want to pretend that it isn't. Sometimes such conversations restore closeness. Sometimes they show that a partner is not ready for depth. Both are important information, because living in emotional emptiness is also a choice, just a choice without awareness. And if after this video you feel not lighter but clearer, if you begin to look differently at what is happening between you, then you have already stepped out of the most dangerous point, the point of self-deception. Emptiness is not the end, but it is the moment when you can no longer pretend that everything is fine.